Harry, welcome back to the Mea Culpa podcast. Thank you for joining me. Lots to talk about as we just start this new administration. I really want to start with not even talking about Trump. I want to begin by talking about President Biden and the pardons.
Yeah.
So far, all of President Biden's pardons were focused on nonviolent offenders and drug-related crimes and his family. Let me ask you this question. What does this suggest about his approach to justice reform? Compared that to Trump's more politically motivated clemencies, such as the 1,500 January 6th hostages, right? The ones in the past for people like Steve Bannon, Roger Stone, and so on. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and we should add to that, Michael, his commutation of nearly all the sentences on death row, which Trump just this morning said he's going to try to countermand, maybe get the states to prosecute and the like. So the ones you've mentioned before we get to, because you didn't include the specific final flurry, you could call basically traditional civil justice reform minded. You might think about there's a certain tradition of pardons to kind of recognize social advance. So draft dodgers as a whole were pardoned, and in one fell swoop, and different sort of putting to bed different social kind of fights of the past. So I would say that largely, by the ones you've mentioned so far, were orthodox to a point. They didn't include specific kinds of high-profile criminals, as say with Mark Rich or Casper Weinberger. But of course, now we would move to the specific flurry. Oh, and then as to his family, those are very unorthodox, but Trump couldn't have been more vicious in promising to go after them any way he could, and it'd be foolhardy to disbelieve him and to not use your power as in your final acts in office. So it's something that Trump, I think, forced his hand on, and history, even though it feels self-serving, will forgive him for. So that's unorthodox. Otherwise, they're, pretty much within the run of history. And then there are the final flurry of really protective or safe harbor pardons in the last minutes of the administration.
Yeah. So look, literally as he was just about to walk into the Capitol for the inauguration of Trump, he hits the little button on his cell phone. His folks turn around and send out notification to the press that he issued pardons for basically his entire family. The question that I want to ask you is, what legal justifications could he use? And how do you think that this differs from Trump's controversial commutations of allies? Because me personally, I don't see it as a difference.
Yeah.
I see Joe Biden or the people who were advising him. I believe it is exactly the same thing that Trump did with those alleged controversial commutations of allies. He didn't think about anybody else. And as you know, I had an application in. So did people like Lev Parnas and dozens of others who happened to also be listed on various different enemies lists. And I applauded him. I applauded President Biden when he pardoned Hunter, because I didn't believe in the consequences that Hunter most probably would have faced but for the pardoning by his father. But you may also remember on the weekend when talking to Simone Sanders, I said, yeah, but I'm somebody's son too. So is Lev. So are people like Cassidy Hutchinson, Alyssa Farah Griffin, or even Stephanie Grisham, to name just a handful. There are so many people outside of his own family, outside of General Milley, outside of the January 6th, committee There are citizens who are now elevated up that list. So how do you think this differs then from Trump's?
Okay, it's been a while, Michael, that we've had such a, we were in the habit of disagreeing, and then it got kind of boring for your listeners because we, basically we're in lockstep. But here we've got, I would say, a night and day disagreement. Let me put aside you and the other four very virtuous pardon cases that you mentioned, and
what about Stormy Daniels?
And go to to his family, and then we'll go more broadly to who he did do and didn't do in the whole January 6th mess. His family, totally, as I've said, anomalous, but really wrong to say of a piece or indistinguishable from Trump's pardons. Trump pardoned plainly guilty, vicious, violent criminals who committed grave offenses against the Constitution. Biden acted protectively in a self-interested way for his family, to be sure, but this was on behalf of. It's an unusual use because you don't think of presidents as going after completely innocent people, but this president, the new president, you had to think would, and so it's I think a unique in the history of pardons anyway. Maybe this will continue, but in the history of pardons, rationale, but I think a valid one. Now the question is, and now let's come to you and others,
wait,
why it didn't expand.
Before we come to me,
Yeah. Okay.
I was also referring to when we're talking about controversial commutations of allies, more like people like the Steve Bannons of the world or the Roger Stones of the world, right? What would differ from
Biden didn't do any controversial commutations. I mean, he did.
Well,
I'm sorry, I should take that
Hunter.
back. He did commutations of all of people on death row, with a couple exceptions, and that's going to be controversial. But he let me. Well, sorry. You wanted to bring up Hunter. I agreed with you on Hunter because it was that. Huh?
No, what I want to bring up is, why is it that if Trump does it for folks like Steve Bannon or Roger Stone, why is it any different than what Joe Biden did for Hunter and the rest of his family?
Because in the first instance, they are guilty pieces of shit who really threatened the country and continue to. In the other instance, there's either someone who was unfairly prosecuted because his name was Biden, or others who might be with not even the pretense of a crime. And that's using pardons as they never had to be used before as a shield. But that's the principled reason. We're talking about guilty, undeserving people on the one hand, and innocent, vulnerable on the other, who might not have been selected, but that was having to err on the side of caution, and there's the events that happened since justify it. He's still fulminating about Biden and Cheney and Milley even today. But can I move?
But you said something which I found interesting. It's like, well, they were concerned about whether Trump would weaponize the Department of Justice, or it wouldn't even have to be Trump weaponizing. It would be like what Bill Barr did. Pam Bondi would weaponize the Department of Justice. Kash Patel would go ahead, or they would use the IRS or some other action. When people turn around and say, do you think that something like that could happen under a Trump administration? My ears catch on fire, right? And I start spitting out lava. Why? Because it's exactly what he did. It's exactly what was done under his previous administration.
I have my copy right here, by the way, but anyway, go ahead.
It's exactly what happened under his administration when Bill Barr weaponized the Department of Justice, unconstitutionally remanded me, and sent me back, where I ended up a total of 51 days of solitary confinement. So yes, I acknowledge that the actions and the allegations and the claims of retribution certainly validated Joe Biden's decision in doing this. I just don't think he went far enough. I think the people
Okay.
that
So now,
were around him,
yeah.
they're typical Democrats. They really don't think like Trump does out of the box. I mean, Trump's not even in the box. He's not even in the same playground, right? Because let me ask it to you this way. A lot of legal experts, and we've seen it all over television the last couple of days, they argue that Biden, and I should say his people around him, that they failed and failed fucking miserably to protect subpoenaed individuals, such as those who testified against Trump. So my question to you is, how does this inaction expose these individuals to potential retaliation when Trump's people are either confirmed for their positions or just take the helm because confirmation may not even be needed? I mean, you think, could pardons for those individuals have mitigated the risk? And why do you think that they just abandoned them?
Okay, and here, Michael, we have, after our diametrical opposition, my resistance to your equation of Biden and Trump. Now we are back in, I think, lockstep. And look, and it's important. So it's clear that, and we knew this from sort of whispers coming out of the administration, that they were thinking about this and going back and forth and having big lists and little lists, etc. And I think some of the lines that Biden decided to draw at the last minute, you can understand as a sort of core circle of you could say virtue, or what would be a truly odious prosecutions by Trump. So Milley and I think Fauci are paradigmatic of, they've served the government all their lives. They're completely blameless. It would be an absolute travesty, etc. But the other folks, the January 6th committee and staff, which, by the way, might have had some constitutional immunity to try to at least allege, as do already. I think this is why Jack Smith and company aren't there. They have immunity as prosecutors. But the category that I think may most rankle you is the extension of pardons to police officers who testified. And we have, I think, Michael Fanone is the best example. You got a guy, it's in my Substack today. Guy pleads guilty, 12 and a half years, and crows to his buddies, I taz the fuck out of him, and Fanone doesn't want the pardon. He's worried it implies guilt, which it doesn't. We can talk about that legally if you want. But what did he do that puts him in harm's way? He responded to lawful subpoenas to testify, and thank God he did, to give the people a real sense of the incredible gravity of this episode. Now, there are other people who are in that same category, and the five you mentioned, you and Hutchinson and the others. What did you basically do that has put you in the crosshairs? You did a citizen's duty. You would have been, justifiably held in contempt had you not, to respond to subpoena and give testimony to the country. And I think probably there were others in your category, but especially your livelihood's been taken from you. And then some of the others, they're young, they could really get screwed big time, even if they win cases. But at the end of the day, Biden decided I can't do everybody, and he drew a line among the people who are virtuous candidates for pardons because all they did was testify, and thank God that they did. But he drew a special line around law enforcement personnel.
Tell me, why do you say thank God? Because the
Because
January 6th documents, even though that they recently came out, volume 1, Trump is not going to be held accountable for that. On top of that, we saw Judge Merchan, provide this unconditional discharge, right, where there is no accountability, there's no repercussion. So what was the whole
Yeah,
point?
there you
So
go.
now you have
I like
a
the
half a
way,
dozen to a dozen people who have done
or
what you
maybe even
said
more, because there were
more.
people behind the scenes. But I like the way you put it. You said no accountability, no repercussions. No repercussions for sure. But given that, the only accountability, but it's not trivial. In fact, it's essential, is to history, to the facts, to a full account of what happened. Hopefully, preparatory to a social condemnation of it down the line, and not now. We're in a really terrible position. But imagine, Michael, we're struggling now with the emergence of authoritarian trends in rule, and what's the biggest? What's his seemingly his almost number one goal in life is to smother and erase everything about the 2020 election aftermath from history, and have people just say, he's still adhering to this idea that he won it, for Christ's sake. So the ability of society to have, even without his being held accountable, to have a actual, formal report, as with 9/11, as with the Warren Commission, to have something like the Jack Smith report that makes it clear, don't listen, anyone, including history, to this crap he's selling. We're talking about crimes that we believe in, and only the happenstance of his being elected preempted. So I find, especially because he otherwise skated clear, it's exigent to have the historical account. And that's why I say, and God bless that you and Tiffany, I'm saying her name, Cassie Hutchinson, and others came forward. It's an immense service to country, and they're looking at potentially getting kicked in the teeth for it.
But not immense enough that Biden and his people would go ahead and to protect us from harm's way, right? So
I don't disagree.
thank you. It's sort of
I
like,
don't disagree.
Right, thank you, but go
I wrote in my
really
Substack why the case for protective pardons is a broad one. It's it's the distinction that their law enforcement, and they got subpoenas, I find unpersuasive. I understand. Look, pardons are inherently sort of mucky, subjective, a kind of an arbitrary. But I think this cut should have been broader,
especially only because the incoming administration has made crystal clear they're not even hiding who they want to fight with. Now, look, I'm done with my sentence. I did all 6 years, 3 years on the sentence and 3 years of supervised release. I'm done. And as
for crimes very similar to what Trump got unconditional discharge for, right?
Except I did 6 years and he did none.
That's what I'm saying.
Sure. And so as I was talking to somebody yesterday, we turned around and we said, I'm not so sure that the historical record, which I agree with you, is extremely important. And I get your point. But my position and your position, of course, are on different sides of the spectrum because I actually had to live it. Whereas you guys all get to read about it or to opine about it in Substacks and on television and in newspaper articles and so on.
100%.
We're all suffering, and
you are really, you five are the very first. Here come the guy. You're on the very first lines of battle. There's no doubt about it.
And don't forget too. You may remember.
Yeah.
He also sued me at one point for $500 million, which everybody, including Republican lawyers, said, this is the stupidest case ever. It's going to get thrown out of court.
But it still cost you to defend, right? And if it were criminal investigation,
$300,000 just in that bogus federal case. And he was very smart about it. They dropped the case before the judge decided, so I couldn't even hit him with an anti-slap motion or go for legal fees. So look, let me just moving on for a quick second here, because as I have written in my book Revenge, and I talk about it all the time, Bill Barr under the Trump administration, the first time in 2017, they weaponized pardons to protect allies again, while
Totally.
Biden's
Sheriff
people, I just
Joe,
felt, just
give me a
were
break.
way too
Yeah.
cautious. They're just way too cautious
Totally.
to avoid political blowback. The problem that I have with that is the way that it shapes the difference in public perception of justice under their various administrations. Republicans look strong. Trump looks strong. He's like, a lot of people turn around and they say, oh, Trump is this, Trump is that, he's bad, his policies are bad, and so on. But you know what a lot of other people are saying right now? In fact, the plurality of Americans are saying, yeah, but at least he's doing something. I may not agree with the policy. I may not like what he's
you
doing.
You really think people are saying, I mean, we're going to see in the next few days, every member of Congress, Pam Bondi. Huh?
I hear it on the street. Yeah. At least he's trying. At least he's trying. Yeah, I don't like the fact that he did X, Y, and Z, but you know what? Fuck it. At least he's trying. He's making an attempt, as opposed to this cautious playbook that Democrats are constantly playing. It's like, it's like going to an old playbook when you've lost that game, that football game, the last 5 times in a row. Maybe you turn around and you scrap it and you go with something a little bit more, a little newer, with ingenuity.
Not all off tackle and a few passes. Yeah, look, but I really want to. We'll see. I think this is an abomination against the Constitution, but and it's done, which is the worst. And he's done a lot of other things. Some of them strike me as blunders, perhaps. But I'm really wondering, Pam Bondi testifies you can't give pardons to people who are violent to officers. J.D. Vance says it on TV. Every member of Congress is going to be asked, do you support this? And what are they going to say? Michael, you may be right, but will the American people actually say, oh, I mean, we saw these marauders on TV try to hijack the Constitution, but, at least he's doing something trying to let them out. It's small solace given how terrible the action is. Historic, the worst thing a president has ever done, I think, to the country. But I'm not sure that he's going to find broad acceptance for him.
Well, in the immortal words of Billy Joel, you may be right, I may be crazy, right? Let me ask you this, though, because again, the broader message here about these actions, right, where Biden pardoned a lot of marijuana convictions, and good for him, right? Trump had more self-serving
for Obama, right?
Mm-hmm. Trump had more self-serving clemencies and so on. A lot of people, I'm telling you, are saying, good for him, fuck them. He wants to buck the system. My question is really broader.
Yeah.
What message do you think that these actions, whether it's Biden's or Trump's, send to the country about the integrity of presidential pardon power?
Yeah, really good question. And again, we may differ, because to me, the Biden send, we are justifiably afraid of the corrupt president to follow, and and Trump send, an absolute middle finger to the justice system, to the judges. Can you imagine how apoplectic behind closed doors all the judges of the D.C. District Court, who one after another told these thugs, who they were and their offense against the Constitution.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ali. That's clean, fresh nutrition that your dog needs in 5 flavors that they're absolutely going to flip over. And you don't have to be a veterinary nutritionist to know that feeding your dog real whole foods with minimal processing, it's one of the best choices that you can make for their health. It's a perfectly portioned, whole, fresh food diet that's been proven to extend your pup's life. Get a load of this, by 2.5 years. And who doesn't want to have more time with their best friend? So with absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, Ali, it's made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients that are carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. And because the time between Ali's gentle cooking and your dog's chowing down is minimal, they don't need preservatives to extend shelf life. With 5 protein first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, damn, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ali. Okay, so here's how it works. First, you go and you fill out Ali's 30-second quiz. And what they'll do is they'll create a customized meal plan based on your pup's weight, activity level, and other health information. Ali then crunches the numbers, and then they recommend the right recipe and daily portions for your precious pup based on hundreds of thousands of real dog results. And listen to this one. You can get your starter box. This is for first timers. Ali will send you out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide on how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. So listen, you can customize this plan easily by Ali offering 3 meal plans to choose from so that you can go out and choose between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. And they also have treats and supplements. And it's why I say that you should give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste a personalized meal plan from Ali. So head right now to OLLIE.com/Cohen and tell them all about your dog. And use code Cohen to get a load of this, 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. Again, that's OLLIE.com/Cohen and enter code Cohen to get 60% off your first box. Again, that's OLLIE.com/Cohen and enter code Cohen to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ali. When your car breaks down, you take it to a mechanic with no hesitation. You need it, and it's not something most guys can fix themselves. I know I can't. And men should think the exact same way about ED. But the reality is, you might be hesitant to seek help. Thankfully, through HIMSS, you can get access to personalized ED treatment without stepping outside the door. HIMSS is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your own couch. HIMSS provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. You hear that? 95% cheaper. And the process, it's 100% online, so that there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. And if prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, HIMSS can help you find the ED option that works best for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/Cohen. That's HIMS.com/Cohen for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, that's hims.com/Cohen. And the product mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified by safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
The message, and again, I go back to, this isn't even like, pardoning someone a murderer, that because the crimes here really were against all of us, the Constitution, the judicial system, etc. So it sends the most nihilistic message I think any president has in history. It's all bullshit. It's all political, and of course that is part of the problem. I worked at the Department of Justice. I know the Department of Justice. This is the biggest operation in the history of the Department of Justice, and it was no way politicized, no way rigged. But that's the message that it sends. And look, he won the election, and there's some reason to think that message has caught hold of a plurality of the country, as you say. But we've got to fight for the final reckoning and the verdict of history, because otherwise, right, if the approval continues and Trump continues, and we are looking at Viktor Orban and Hungary. So I think it's the worst. Honestly, as I was kind of, as what was coming out of your ears? Lava. As lava was coming, fire out of my ears yesterday.
Blood was coming out of her eyes and her ears.
Oh, right. Or whatever. Yeah. Okay. I actually wrote up on Blue Sky, this got to be the worst, most treacherous thing a president has ever done in history of the Constitution. And I served up the question to Heather Cox Richardson, the famous historian everyone listens to, and she was good enough to answer right away. And she said, I got nothing. This is huge, meaning it is the worst ever. And that's the message it sends as well. It just couldn't have done anything worse this first day. It's absolutely nauseating. Worse than nauseating.
We saw many come out in executive
right, but this stands alone in my view. But a lot of the other ones are fucked up, but this stands alone in my view.
The concern that I have really came after I was watching. I didn't even realize that there was a young man, he must be maybe 20s, early 20s or so, named Jackson. And he actually turned in his father as being one of the January 6th insurrectionists. And obviously, his father got put away. His father is now pardoned. And he's concerned for his safety. He said, my father is violent. We're completely estranged. He then went out and said that he went out, he bought a gun, and he moved. He moved so that his father wouldn't be able to find him. And that really hit me hard. I speak to my folks every day. I speak to my dad, probably twice a day. And I have my entire life, even when I was away at school and then law school. And even, once I got married and moved out in the whole 9 yards, I speak to my parents every day, multiple times a day. The only thing that kept circulating in my brain was, how is this going to embolden, will it embolden future political violence, especially with this administration, knowing that Trump just took what you described as the most fucked up of fucked up, and he pardoned this whole class of individuals, commuted some of their sentences, but basically it was like a 15.
I think all but Rhodes are pardoned. I think Rhodes gets commuted, but yeah.
So you're talking about over 1,500 people, and the question that when I was
the pardons are but go ahead.
Right. The question is, when I was listening to this young man talk about it, you could see the fear in his eyes about how this could embolden future political violence, especially knowing that the power of the pardon, the presidential pardon, appears to be limitless.
You bet. I mean, this is so, and not legally, but morally, if this guy gets hurt, Trump is responsible. But it's more, look, these marauders, these thugs, these domestic terrorists who were just released, what do you think they think now? It's like they're a group of brown shirts, like a pair, group ready to do Trump's bidding and rough up anybody who is on the other side. This part, I for so long I just categorically avoided analogies to Nazi Germany because they're okay, as bad as it is not Nazi Germany, which I still would say, but this little aspect, he's got now this group of brown shirts, an absolute thug. So I think, are they going to go back now to their like day jobs and be good citizens the way people who get pardons are supposed to? No friggin' way. They're like, where do we go next, boss? Whose teeth do you want us to kick in now? That's A, fun, and B, they're rewarded for it. It's a horrifying prospect just thinking of this, private force of sort of paramilitary marauders. Imagine that, they think that's what they're supposed to do now, and they certainly have license to do it, right?
Sure. Well,
So
then
bad.
what happens to going back to the subpoenaed individuals who testified that have been left out in the dark? Because
100.
there's a real, Harriet, there's a real difference of opinion here by 50% of the country versus 50% of the country. People like yourself.
You think honestly, I know they voted for me. You think 50% of the country thinks you ought to get, beat up by brown shirts and Cassidy? Yeah.
No, but there's plenty of them that fall into that ultra MAGA category.
Yeah. Okay.
And the problem that I see is people like yourself call them insurrectionists. They call them thugs. Trump calls them hostages and patriots. There's
Heroes
a real
and patriots.
difference.
Yeah.
Heroes and patriots. All right. My question is, this rhetoric, it doesn't appear at this point in time, even though some of them have done 2.5, 3 years of time already on much longer sentences, the fact that they are now pardoned sort of exonerates them from any accountability. So legally, what recourse exists to hold them accountable even after they receive these pardons? And I suspect the answer is nothing.
Yeah, I think the answer is nothing. You can imagine some states trying to fill the breach, but I don't see it. But it's even worse, Michael. I mean, some of the people who were released, having finished their sentence, already committed other crimes. These guys, this is one of the reasons that you never give pardons to people who act violently, and you always require them to express remorse. We have a group of people who've been absolutely reinforced in their remorselessness and absolutely reinforced in their violence, just going for the brass knuckles and raring to go. So really, I think they are a sort of clear and present danger. And now let's ask, what happens in Pam Bondi's Department of Justice if one of these guys, goes out and commits other crimes, or people know they are conspiring to do additional violent conduct? Do they go after them? Do they arrest them after the president has just basically said these efforts are heroic? It is quite a fix. And again, I really feel for especially, you, Cassie Hutchinson and the like, who, these jackanapes are like, they are ready to take orders. It's just completely deplorable.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you, because you were part of the DOJ, right?
Yeah.
At one point.
Well, for a long time, and
a long time. What kind of tension you think within the judicial system, especially, for example, amongst the judges and the prosecutors who actually worked to convict these 1,500 plus people? How do you think that this impacts the DOJ's morale? And will there be anybody left in the DOJ from the previous administrations with an S? Will there be any people left over from previous administrations, or are they cleaning house with this new ideology where, as you just said, what happens if they go out and they commit some sort of an act? Will they be prosecuted? How do you prosecute somebody that Trump just pardoned? Wouldn't that make him look bad?
Yeah, right. I was there last Thursday, Michael, for the farewell ceremony for Garland, and and since you mentioned two constituencies, most of the federal district court bench was there as well, and both express, in side conversations, but also kind of implicitly, the sense of one, reverence. I know you're not necessarily a Merrick Garland fan, but
Oh,
reverence by
you
the.
say that name, my stomach turns. Like now, I may have to go take an Imodium.
I got time because I will defend him as long as you have take whatever trip you need to other rooms. But let me just say, I'm being
a Supreme Court judge. He
totally,
should have been a
I'm being
Supreme Court
descriptive
judge.
here. I'm being descriptive in answering your question, which is the huge rank and file of the department, the heart and soul, the lifeblood of it were completely out in force, and their admiration for the do the right thing 4-year administration he had just done was rivaled only by their obvious loathing, contempt, and terror at what was coming. And the judges, they were already the 1,500. They came before this bench of 10 people in the DC District Court, and all of them, from Reagan appointees to Trump appointees and everything in between, they, as a single voice, condemned and castigated the people who've just been pardoned, and absolutely rejected, based on facts, their self-glorifying notion that they were heroes or patriots. And I guarantee you that group is completely disgusted. So, and back to DOJ, what'll happen? The number one guy has already left. I don't mean Jack Smith. I mean the top counterterrorism prosecutor. And there's just U.S. attorneys. I was a U.S. attorney at a change of administration, and you hang around for a few months and you try to make an orderly transition. You've had a massive exodus already, because they're half in protest and half because they don't want to take orders from these guys. The people who know the Department of Justice, and especially the career folks, I believe, are completely afraid, revolted, disgusted by what happened.
Yeah. I started thinking about this the other day. Trump doesn't do anything unless that there's some form of a benefit to him.
Personally, yeah.
All right, personally. And I was thinking...
How about this Bitcoin? Sorry, go ahead.
And I was thinking, when he pardoned these January 6th hostages, you think that he was doing it for the purpose of showing that, well, if none of them any longer are incarcerated, none of them are criminals, you think in some way in his mind he thinks that this is some immunity for himself, that no longer can anybody make the allegation that Trump even incited this attack? You think that that's what he's possibly thinking?
I gave up a long time ago trying to psychoanalyze him, but I think it's a really good, just a terrific question, because, he does have this ongoing, inane obsession with really trying to erase from the pages of history everything he did, starting with the very notion which he is continuing to propound today, that he won the 2020 election. It's bizarre.
Wait, he didn't? He didn't?
Yeah. This just in. I mean, it's really bizarre, right? At this point, he's riding high. He could just think about forward, but really, it's as if he goes to bed at night and wakes up in the morning wondering, can he take an eraser to the pages of history, which is a pernicious idea. But I do think that is part of it. Remember, something happened, right? When J.D. Vance didn't just on his own go onto the Sunday shows and say that, I don't think people who commit violence should be pardoned. Pam Bondi didn't, everything she did was scripted. So I think that people had sort of understood, Jesus, Mr. President, you can't do that. And maybe that's where he was going. And he said, screw it. These are not only are these his guys who were his allies against the entire country, but as you say, somehow their continuing incarceration stands as an illustration
to
of
his
what
involvement.
the total fact of history, that he tried to steal the election. And I think in some really twisted way, just as he believes winning this election exonerates him from the crimes, there's something about their mass release that serves this twisted, impossible purpose of erasing his sins from the pages of history.
Yeah, you got to erase something. The funny thing is, I started thinking as well about the upcoming midterm elections. It's so hard to believe. We literally just inaugurated a new president, 47th president of the United States. And when he tells you, how many times have you heard me, both publicly and privately, say to you, why are people ignoring when Donald Trump tells you what he intends to do? Why are you scratching it? He's not going to do that. Stop it. It's just campaign bluster.
When's he ever?
Stop it. Stop. So he did it, as he did a whole bunch of these presidential executive orders.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but this is one of my points with Biden, why I think it's not condign, is you had to believe him.
We're going to get back.
All right. Go ahead. Anyway,
back to good old Joe. But
all right,
he promised his MAGA base that he was going to do this, and he lived up to that promise. That's sure.
Right.
The thought that came to my mind was that, okay, so you appealed to a promise that you gave your MAGA base, but at the same time, you think that he's alienating independent voters and suburban conservatives who really weren't happy with him in 2020? You think that this somehow could affect not just his broader electability, but also midterm elections for those that Trump may be promoting? Because you can't win an election off of just the MAGA base. You need that independent. You need those suburban conservatives. As I get older, New Year's to me means different things. Like as a kid, it was party time. Now, it's an opportunity to reflect and to plan for the future, like furthering career goals or making financial moves. And most importantly, ensuring that my family is always taken care of, no matter what happens. So make this year the year that you check, for example, life insurance off your list and protect your family's future with Policy Genius. Policy Genius makes finding and buying life insurance simple so that you can ensure that your loved ones have a financial safety net to cover debt and routine expenses, or even invest that money to earn interest over time if, God forbid, something happens to you. So with Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just a mere $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. And some options are 100% online, and that lets you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Look, when I was 25, I purchased a whole life insurance policy, and it was very inexpensive. And I thought that the coverage would be enough. Now, as my family has grown and my debts have increased, it's not. It's not if, God forbid, something would have happened to me. So whether it's to cover mortgage payments, car loans, your child's education, or even for burial expenses, this would all be covered by life insurance. So when you have life insurance, you feel protected. And you know what? So does your loved ones. Now, many people believe that obtaining life insurance is difficult and time consuming. Not with Policy Genius. Nope. Policy Genius combines digital tools with the expertise of real licensed agents. And it lets you compare quotes from America's top insurers side by side for free with no hidden fees. Their licensed support teams, they help you get what you need and fast so that you can get on with your life. They answer questions, they handle the paperwork, and they advocate for you throughout the entire process. So the bottom line, life insurance is a form of financial planning, and Policy Genius, it's the country's leading online insurance marketplace. And even if you already have life insurance through work, it may not protect all your family's needs, or it may not even follow you if you leave the job. So join thousands of happy Policy Genius customers who left 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. So secure your families tomorrow so you have peace of mind today. Head right now to policygenius.com/Michael or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Michael. Go now.
I honestly do. I'm not a political expert, as I say to you repeatedly, but I honestly do think that look. Well, a lot of people have talked about if only the New York trial had been televised, etc. But what was televised was, I'm happy to call it an insurrection, but was the murderous mob looking to hang Mike Pence, etc. We all saw that. All the suburban voters you're talking about saw that, and now that they have to contrast that with the justice, the deep injustice that Trump has served up. And it's more than that. We've got a razor thin margin in the House, and also they have the 3-person advantage, but the field, the slate is pretty favorable for Democrats in the Senate in 2 years, and each and every person who doesn't is going to have to answer for Trump. Do you support what happened here? And some of them are going to be in a terrible position because their constituents are going to be, just as you say, whatever, they cared about the supermarket prices or the like. They have to see this as an absolute, assault on the country.
Yeah.
And so, I think it could really hurt him. And I think he either doesn't know it, or maybe he said, screw it. The stars are aligned now, like they're never going to be. It's going to get hard. So I'm going to take my shot at doing the one thing I want to do, to just to history and to, the whole deep state or whatever kind of crazy hallucination he has about him.
Which brings me to this point. Trump in his campaign, and true to his word, he vowed to re-enter his administration's earlier, the 2017 immigration policies, the second he gets into the Oval Office. And he did that. My question to you is, how do you think that reinstating these broad deportation criteria affect immigrant communities and current legal protections such as DACA? How do you think that now with these immigrant communities and the surrounding communities that probably work with many of these individuals, right, including the whole birthright citizenship, how do you think that's going to affect 2026 midterms?
And one other instance, he has people didn't see this so much, but he's basically done away with a practice that is just essential, which is people come in, they have a claim that they have a right to make under the law, and they can't do it that second, so they're released into the country. It's a problem generally because sometimes they disappear, though much less than people allege. But he's wiped that away, so I think there's going to be no alternative but to build big detention centers. But as you say, think about the image. Think about, there are what 20% of MAGAites, Steve Bannon, who just never met an immigrant they don't loathe. But that's not our country, and that's not who people are. And we are talking about communities as opposed to this abstract and bullshit idea that there are murderous hordes coming over the border from Texas. We're talking about people who people know, who've lived here for years, who are productive members of the community. And we're talking about sort of jackbooted efforts aided by state, state militias under the false pretense that there's an emergency. That's how he's going to put them in line. And do you remember, this just came to my mind, Michael, but I was at DOJ and it had huge national political implications. It was the other way. It went against the Democrats, but Elian Gonzalez, when the federal government came to get him and he's terrified and in his father's arms and stuff. We're going to have the equivalent of that for, people in communities. And it's just going to be, when did we become the shame and disgust of the world? That's how it's gonna feel. So I think, it's always sort of by anecdote and accidentally, but something like this will happen. It'll spread virally. And then that again, everybody who is, who's in the Republican Party is going to have to answer for it and say, oh, well, it's really important to police the borders. But the stories, the images are going to be violently against them.
Yeah. And another promise that Trump made and he held, again, I don't know how many times I said, don't take my word for it.
Right.
Take the word of the man who you are following. Take his word for it, because everything that he says that he intends to do during this campaign, he intends to do. And if he intends to do something, knowing him for a decade and a half, he generally does it, unless it's absolutely impossible. So you know what? He goes out again. First things first, he's like, oh, that's a big one. I don't know if you were watching the signing. He goes, oh, that's a big one.
Right, exactly.
Big ones, right? You think you were watching like magic.
Yeah, when has it ever paid off, as I said, to think he won't do the worst? But on all levels, did you see one of the other ones he did? It was almost like after this grotesque, smorgasbord of stuff, the little like after dinner mint. He actually has an executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, right?
And also McKinley and McKinley Mountain, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things that said, he's talking, oh, this is a big one. Oh, that's a big one. It's like, you think you're watching Magic Mike, right? Next thing you know, he's signing. And
great
what's
movie,
the big
by
one?
the way.
Yeah. And what's the next one? Withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord.
Yeah.
Then
World Health
Organization. Yeah. I mean, these two withdrawals have profound global implications.
That's right.
My question to you is, how do you think these moves shift America's standing in the world as a leader in climate action and public health policy? You can't step away and expect the world to continue with us in these two fields. I don't understand this move. And I don't understand why. Why these two? We know already. We know we're watching wildfires. We're watching flooding at levels we've never seen before. Why?
Yeah, it's an absolute disaster on the world stage. And again, why? It is this where you know this, that you go back and over the years, like he all of a sudden starts in his free association patter to be talking about showers and toilets, and it's some kind of weird little obsession in his small mind. But we already are pretty shamefully middling, given we're the most powerful democracy in the history of the world, in all kinds of benchmarks, including public health. And over the last few years in Biden rule, as he repaired things, we had a lot of allies who were justifiably jumpy, thinking it happened once, it could happen again. And sure as hell, it did happen again. He's back. And I think not only are we the subject of absolute humiliation on the world stage, but our power, even down the line, to influence world events to the good, I think may be permanently compromised, especially because we have a new set of allies now. I mean, our closest, his closest cousins, who are they? Orban and Putin. And the
And Xi
traditional one,
Jinping and
right?
Kim
I
Jong
mean, there
Un.
really is something. So, who, on top of everything else, people who we really, really need and the world needs for a general, flourishing, are like, we don't trust the U.S. Why the hell should we trust the U.S.? We don't even trust them, with information, much less to do the right thing. It's a disaster.
So let me ask you this then, because nearly 100 executive orders, a
Yeah,
100 executive orders in one day.
yeah.
There's no doubt that the execution of those presidential executive orders would overload our federal bureaucracy. There's no way that it does not. What mechanisms exist to challenge or to block any of these orders? And how effective do you think that, like a lawsuit or even a congressional action or injunction, would be to
Yeah.
prevent? Again, we know that he intends on rounding up immigrants. We know this. So, could lawsuits, congressional actions, or injunctions be used to hamper these executive orders?
They already have. And it's case by case and pretty complicated legal stuff. But to set out the basic principles, first, if he does things that are just illegal, maybe, for example, declaring an emergency when there isn't, or trying somehow to disregard Congress in TikTok. There are, you sue. Already, the creation of the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk's little plaything, has this morning had 5 suits against them because they have not complied with federal law for advisory committees. So
They're
unless
not.
and until,
By the way,
huh?
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you, Harry, but they are no longer a advisory committee. He has now turned them into a department. And on top of everything, he was saying that he intends to hire 20 more people to the Doge department and so on. It's going to be across the street in like the executive building or something like that. When they asked whether Elon Musk would have an office in the West Wing, I mean, this is no longer an advisory program. This is
Yeah.
a department.
Yeah, but this is a clever thing on top of a clever thing that you're. I mean, the short answer, I know as you always say, the hour goes quickly. But he, under the law, maybe in a few years, as happened with Orban in Hungary, he's just stormed past that. But you cannot just create departments or advisory committees without complying with certain rules. You cannot just say, well, actually, we'll see about this. Something's an emergency when it isn't. The courts may let him. But the short answer is there are a handful of them, immigration for sure, that are A, vulnerable to lesser or greater degrees, and B, definitely already, I know of some of them, I've seen some of them, there's going to be all kinds of lawsuits seeking to enjoin, and some of them will be successful.
No, we'll see. The funniest thing is I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday, and I turned around and I said, everybody is predicting total disaster, because some of these executive orders, the rounding up of the migrants, the birthright citizenship, the creation of internment camps, the implementation of this new Doge department, the cutting of this and then the slicing of that, firing half the people that work in government. By the way, there's not enough people, actually. I hate to say it. Government's completely inefficient. I still can't get my FOIA documents from 4.5 years ago, where 3 members of Congress asked, a senator, a dozen people have asked. What if hypothetically Trump's way of doing business, what if it actually succeeds?
In what
Could you
sense?
imagine? It succeeds. Maybe the removal of
You mean he gets away with it?
No. That the tariffs, for example, what if it starts to bring in massive amounts of money to the country? What if hypothetically that businesses start opening up here as opposed to there? When he starts showing the rounding up of these illegal migrants and shipping them off. And it reminds me of like going back to some of these films that you see on World War II, right? Where you had the minister of media and they put it out there and it starts to build up even a bigger MAGA frenzy. That MAGA frenzy is no longer, right, just a small cult of Trumpism. It actually becomes the cult of the United States. And Trumpism, if he is successful, could actually replace the Constitution. And that's a fear. And people don't really think about it.
My Substack yesterday, it happened in Hungary and it could happen here. That's the ultimate dystopia, and that is the end of the American experiment. In some of your things, let's say he stumbles into, any economist will tell you the tariffs are idiotic. Let's say somehow he's vindicated. I'm a rule of law guy, Michael, and all of that would be so secondary to me to the undermining of the Constitution and the constitutional norms and the rule of law. So if he somehow were to, and there's no reason to think it, there's every reason to think he's completely distorted Biden's record and what he will do. But if the price of milk goes down and everyone's happy, I will, with my dying breath, say this guy is a constitutional villain. And if he succeeds, we are toast as a democracy.
Well, Harry, as I always say, the hour goes by quick. I want to thank you for joining me. I'm going to need you back because, as you know, this is just the beginning. Just the beginning.
208 weeks to go. Yeah. All right, Michael. Good
Harry,
being
well,
with you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.